The photo slipped from the envelope onto the table, my son, laughing beside a corpse like it was a family reunion. Still, I smoothed the edges with shaking hands, the way I used to smooth his hair after nightmares. As the scent of his daughter's shampoo lingered from her sleepover, I realized he'd been watching us, recently. While the kettle shrieked, I remembered the fake passport with his face and someone else's name. That's when I knew I didn't lose him to the world, he chose to disappear from mine. The same boy I once held at birth is now the man I may have to bury in court. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The phone rang just as I was wiping down the kitchen counter. Landline, that usually meant someone older, someone who still cared enough to talk, not text. Evelyn, it's Margie. Her voice brought back decades in a second. We hadn't talked in a while, but I could tell something was sitting heavy on her. I saw Jason last week, she said. At the bank, he didn't look good, something in his eyes. I don't know, Evelyn, you might want to check in. I laughed it off gently. He's probably just tired, work's been busy. I hope that's all it is, she said, but if it were me, I'd want someone to say something. After we hung up, I stood there for a moment, dish towel in hand, staring at nothing. I wanted to dismiss it. Margie was always a bit dramatic, but something in her voice lingered. That evening, Jason brought Mia over for dinner. Same Jason as always, well-dressed, smiling, pouring us wine while Mia sat at the table with her homework. Long week, he said, loosening his tie, but it's good to be here. Nothing seemed off. He even helped with dishes afterward, cracking jokes about clients and traffic. I watched him from across the kitchen and thought, this is not a man with something to hide. But the next day, something small caught my attention. I was picking Mia up from school when one of her classmates ran up. A boy, maybe 8. My dad said your dad's in trouble, he told her before running off again. Mia froze, then she grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the car. Don't listen to him, she said quickly. I didn't press her, not yet. I told myself kids say strange things. Still, that night I couldn't sleep. Jason had always been a little guarded, private, but I used to call that maturity. Now I wasn't so sure. On Sunday, I stopped by his house. He was in the garage, rummaging through old boxes. Just cleaning out junk, he said, wiping his hands. I noticed a large black container tucked behind the workbench. It was locked. I asked what was in it. He smiled. Tax stuff, old paperwork, you wouldn't want to touch that mess. His tone was light, but he moved between me and the container without thinking. That evening, I sat in my living room with the TV on low and my thoughts louder than anything on the screen. I looked at the framed photo of Jason in his cap and gown. I'd always been proud of him. Still was, wasn't I? But the unease was growing, not loud, not clear, but steady. Margie's call, the boy at school, that locked container. I told myself I was being paranoid. And still, I found myself writing his name down in my notebook. Just his name, nothing more. But I circled it twice. Something was wrong. 2 days passed before I admitted to myself that I needed answers, not assumptions, not hope, not denial, real answers. It started with a receipt I found folded in the backseat of my car after driving Mia home. I recognized Jason's handwriting immediately, his neat, square numbers in blue ink. It was from a supply warehouse on the industrial side of town, a place I'd never heard of. Date, last week. Total, $4,860. For what? The line items were vague. Equipment, materials, storage accessories, not groceries, not business cards or printing supplies, something else. The next morning I drove there. The building looked abandoned from the outside, faded paint, cracked pavement, a rusted sign hanging crooked. But inside, everything was bright, busy, loud. A man behind the counter looked up from his clipboard, surprised to see someone like me, gray hair, pressed blouse, pearl earrings among steel shelving and forklift noise. Ma'am, can I help you? I slid the receipt across the counter. I'm trying to understand what this purchase was. Jason Morgan, my son. His expression shifted like he suddenly wished he hadn't asked. Oh yeah, I remember him. He hesitated, glanced around, then lowered his voice. Big order, high-end lockboxes, storage containers, some security hardware, not cheap stuff, said he needed them fast. My mouth went dry, I forced a smile. He must have some big organizing project. The man didn't return the smile, if you say so. Driving home, my heartbeat wouldn't settle. I replayed every moment from the past few weeks, each excuse, each shift in Jason's tone. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself mothers panic over nothing, but something gnawed at me. That afternoon, I stopped by Jason's house again under the harmless excuse of dropping off a casserole dish he'd left behind. His car wasn't in the driveway. Good. I let myself in with the spare key he'd given me years ago, the one I suddenly realized he probably forgot I still had. The house was too quiet, too clean, like a staged home for sale, not one being lived in. Upstairs, I paused outside his bedroom door. I almost turned back, but the uneasiness inside me felt too loud to ignore anymore. I opened the door. Everything was neat, bed made, clothes arranged by color, desk spotless, but a drawer stuck slightly open beneath the bed caught my attention. I knelt, pulled it out, and found a shoebox tucked behind old winter sweaters. Inside were documents, bank statements with numbers that didn't make sense, deposits far larger than Jason's salary, a passport not his but bearing his signature, and a photo. Jason standing beside a man I'd never seen, a thick stack of cash spread across a table between them. Jason smiling, not his gentle, polite smile, but something harder, colder. I felt my stomach drop so fast I had to sit down. My hands shook as I reached for my phone and called Barbara. She answered on the second ring. Everything okay? No, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. I found something about Jason, something bad. I could hear her breath catch. Evelyn, listen to me. If what you found is serious, you need to confront him before this gets worse. Confront him, the words felt like a weight I wasn't strong enough to lift. What if I'm wrong? I whispered. What if I ruin everything? Barbara paused. What if you don't ask and it ruins you? I didn't answer. I couldn't. I stared at the photo again, the shadowy warehouse background, the stacks of money that shouldn't exist, the expression on Jason's face that I didn't recognize. I used to think I knew my son down to his bones. Now I wasn't sure I knew him at all. And as I sat frozen in his silent, spotless room, I heard a sound outside, tires crunching on gravel. Jason was home. And the evidence was still spread across the floor in front of me. My heart hammered so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I scooped the documents and the photo back into the shoebox, shoved it beneath the sweaters, and slid the drawer shut. I barely had time to smooth the bedspread before the garage door rumbled open. I moved quickly, forcing my breath steady as I headed downstairs, pretending I'd come by to leave the casserole dish. Jason walked in with a grocery bag in his hands, surprised to see me. Mom, you're still here. I held up the empty dish and smiled, hoping my face didn't betray the storm beneath it. Just dropping this off, thought I'd wait a minute in case you got home. He nodded, casual, too casual. Long day, sorry you missed me. I left before my nerves could collapse around me. I didn't exhale until I was back in my car, gripping the steering wheel hard enough to whiten my knuckles. I drove a few blocks, pulled to the curb, and sat there shaking. Everything inside me was screaming to run, to hide from whatever I had just stepped into, but another voice, deeper and stronger, rose up. Know the truth. So I turned the car around. I parked down the street and waited. 20 minutes passed before Jason came out again, dressed differently now, dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low. He checked his phone twice before getting into his car and driving off fast, like he was late for something he couldn't afford to miss. Instinct took over. I walked back to the house, knowing the keypad code as well as my own birthday. Inside, I went straight to the spot on the counter where he always set his phone when he came home. It was still there. He must have grabbed the wrong one when he switched jackets. It vibrated once in my hand. A message preview flashed across the screen. T, we need to move the rest tonight. No delays. My blood went cold. I opened the phone. I'd never violated his privacy before, not once in his entire life. But this wasn't curiosity anymore. This was survival. Messages from T filled the thread. Code words, amounts, locations, words like transfer, shipment, wash, drop point. At least a dozen references to cash, a photo of a storage unit with crates stacked to the ceiling. Another message. T, you're getting sloppy. If anyone finds out, we're done. The final text. T, don't forget who's holding the leverage. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit. I felt physically ill, like the ground beneath me had cracked open. Every memory fought to rewrite itself, every birthday, every hug, every moment I had believed he was good. My son, my only son. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I thought I might pass out. Shame, grief, disbelief, each competing to swallow me whole. I clutched the edge of the kitchen island and forced myself to breathe. I needed to confront him, right then, right there. I needed to look him in the eye and ask why, but another thought stopped me cold. What if he lies? What if he's dangerous now? What if knowing more is the only protection I have? I put his phone back exactly where it had been and left the way I'd come, quiet, unseen, trembling. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the dark window, rehearsing conversations in my head. Nothing sounded right, nothing sounded strong enough. I was terrified of what he could say and even more terrified of what he might confirm. By morning, I hadn't slept. Jason called like it was any normal day. His voice was light, friendly. Mom, sorry I rushed out yesterday. Everything good? Everything good. I almost laughed. I forced my tone steady. Everything's fine. I wasn't ready, not yet. I needed more facts, proof, something undeniable. I wasn't going to confront him blind. When the call ended, I sat in silence and whispered to the empty room, I'm going to find out everything, every single thing. My phone buzzed in my hand, and when I looked down, I froze. An unknown number flashed across the screen. No caller ID. Incoming call. As if someone already knew, I had started digging. And they weren't going to wait. I didn't answer the unknown call. I let it ring until the line went dead, my finger hovering above the screen but never touching it. When it stopped, I powered the phone off and left it face down on the kitchen table. The silence that followed was worse than the ringing. I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, I drove to a pay-by-the-hour office suite downtown, the kind professionals rent for temporary meetings. Barbara had insisted on setting it up. I told her I needed someone discreet, someone sharp. She knew a man named David Allen. When I walked into the waiting room, he stood to greet me. Tall, clean-cut, early 50s, gray at the temples, calm eyes but alert. He shook my hand like a man used to bad news. Mrs. Morgan, he said, I read everything you sent. I ran the numbers last night. You were right to call me. He led me into a small office and closed the door. Then he sat, opened a laptop and spun it so I could see the screen. A list of transactions blinked back at me, names I didn't recognize, wire transfers in foreign currency, deposits marked under shell company names. This one here, he said, tapping the screen, is linked to an import-export front in Miami. Known cover for a laundering pipeline. The others connect to dummy corporations registered out of Delaware, clean on the surface, but they don't actually operate. And Jason, I asked, where is he in all of this? David gave a short breath, like a doctor prepping you for a difficult diagnosis. Your son's business is at the center. We believe he's been washing money through consulting contracts, inflating invoices, moving funds in and out. For how long? Years, at least 5. The room blurred. I blinked fast, trying to focus, and no one stopped him. There's an open federal file, he said, but they haven't moved on it yet. He's not high enough priority, yet. I stared at the screen, numbers, names, all of it meaningless and cold, but it painted a picture I could no longer deny. Jason hadn't made a mistake. This wasn't a single bad choice. He was living in it, built a life around it. The floor shifted beneath me. Why? I whispered. David didn't answer. He just looked at me gently but firmly. I thanked him, paid in cash, and asked him not to contact me unless absolutely necessary. When I left, I sat in my car with the windows rolled down and watched people pass on the street. Mothers pushing strollers, teens walking home from school, a man on a bike whistling a tune I almost recognized. I used to believe Jason was the safest place in my life, that no matter how hard things got, he was one thing I could count on. I didn't know how to hold that belief next to this new truth. Later that evening, I picked Mia up from gymnastics. She ran toward me with that gap-toothed smile, cheeks flushed, ponytail messy. She talked about her cartwheel progress all the way home. I smiled, nodded, asked questions, but I wasn't fully there. My mind was trapped behind the numbers on David's screen, trapped in that photo of Jason with the money, in the text messages, the false passport, the locked box in the garage. After Mia fell asleep in the guest room, I stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. All the warmth and innocence she had, she deserved better than a family cracked wide open by secrets. I walked back to the kitchen and poured myself a drink, half a glass of red wine, and opened a blank page in my notebook. Step 1, protect Mia. Step 2, get everything on record. Step 3, confront Jason, no denial, no bargaining. I sat there for a long time staring at those words, then I underlined protect Mia. Twice. I was going to do this on my MS before Jason had a chance to spin another lie. Just after midnight, my phone buzzed again. This time a message. Unknown number. You're not as invisible as you think, stop digging. I didn't stop, I copied it down in my notebook, I didn't flinch. Because now I had a plan. The message from the unknown number stayed on my phone screen long after the sender disappeared into silence. I stared at it until the words blurred. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something colder than fear settle inside me, certainty. Whoever sent that message knew what I was doing, which meant I wasn't imagining any of this. It was bigger than I had understood. By the next morning, I knew I needed more than numbers and suspicions. I needed the truth laid bare, even if it shattered me. I called David and told him we needed to meet again. His silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough for me to hear my own pulse. Mrs. Morgan, he said quietly, are you sure you want to keep going? Once you hear what I have, you don't get to unknow it. I want everything, I said, no exceptions. We met in the same rental office, but the air felt heavier this time, like the room itself knew what was coming. David didn't bother with pleasantries. He opened a thick folder, slid it across the table, and waited for me to look. Inside were pages stamped with federal seals, printed emails, surveillance summaries, lists of names and dates I didn't recognize. But Jason's name was everywhere. This, David said, tapping the first page, is a federal investigation file. Your son is a person of interest tied to a criminal organization called the Vance Group. They run money, drug profits, weapons deals, international trafficking through legitimate businesses. Your son's consulting firm is one of the laundering channels. The floor seemed to tilt. He's working with criminals, my voice cracked on the last word. David nodded. More than working with them, he's a key player. Several accounts connect directly to him. They have enough evidence to move, but they're watching, waiting for the bigger targets. My stomach twisted. You're saying they've known about him for years? Almost 4, he said. They've been tracking wire transfers and offshore movement since 2021. Years. 4 years of lies spoken across my dinner table. 4 years of watching Mia's school plays while laundering blood money. 4 years of smiling at me like nothing was wrong. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to steady myself. Why hasn't he been arrested? Because he's protected by the people he works with, David said carefully. And because if he goes down too early, bigger players walk free. The federal team wants leverage, not closure. What happens if they take him? I whispered. David hesitated. Retaliation, they might come after anyone he's close to, his family especially. That's likely why you received that message. My blood ran cold. My family was at risk because of my son. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the hum of overhead lights. My chest felt too tight to breathe. I tried to picture the boy I raised, the one who used to fall asleep holding picture books, who cried when he accidentally broke a neighbor's window playing baseball, who whispered goodnight prayers. That boy didn't exist anymore. What do? I asked, barely audible. David folded his hands. You need to think carefully before confronting him. If he feels cornered, he might act unpredictably. If the people he works with sense a threat, they won't hesitate to protect themselves. My throat ached. He's my son. And you could be the only person left who can tell him the truth he refuses to see. I stared at the folder, unable to touch it. There were two paths split in front of me. Tell him tonight and risk igniting whatever fuse he had lit. Or wait and gather more information, protect Mia first, control the timing, take away his ability to lie. A mother's heart and a survivor's instinct warred inside me. Slowly, I reached across the table and pulled the folder toward me. My hand shook, but I didn't let go. I'm going to confront him, I said, but I'm going to prepare first. He won't see me coming. David nodded. Then be careful. If he's this deep, he won't walk away without a fight. I closed the folder and stood, legs unsteady but resolve sharper than steel. As I walked to the door, David spoke again, not loud but enough to stop me cold. Evelyn, there's something else you should know. I turned. He's not just laundering money. Someone connected to the Vance Group died last month, and Jason's name is in the report. The air left my lungs in a rush. Dead. A real death. My son could be tied to something irreversible. I gripped the doorknob to keep from collapsing. Whatever confrontation I had imagined before, it was nothing compared to what waited now. And this time, someone might not survive it. I waited until Sunday. Claire had taken Mia to her piano recital and Jason was home alone. I told him I was bringing over some of Dad's old cufflinks he'd once asked about, just an excuse to get through the door. He sounded relaxed on the phone, almost relieved to hear my voice. He had no idea what was coming. When I stepped into the living room, he was wearing jeans and a navy sweater, holding a glass of iced tea like it was any other afternoon. He looked up and smiled. You didn't have to drive all the way over here for those. I walked past him and set my purse on the coffee table. Jason, sit down. He blinked. Everything okay? I'm not going to ask again. Something in my tone made him freeze. Slowly, he sat. I took the folder from my bag and placed it on the coffee table between us. I didn't open it, just let it sit there like a loaded weapon. I know about the Vance Group, the money, the names, the storage units, the dead man in that file. His expression didn't change right away, just the smallest flicker around his mouth. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't flinch. Don't lie to me. He laughed once, short, hollow. Where are you getting this? Have you been reading conspiracy blogs? I opened the folder and turned it toward him. The bank transactions, the surveillance photos, the text message screenshots. I didn't speak. I just let the silence settle like ash. He leaned forward, picked up one of the pages and set it back down without reading it. His shoulders sagged, his mask dropped. Okay, he said quietly. Fine. My breath caught just for a moment. Hearing it from him was different than reading it in a report. It made it real. He rubbed his hands together like they were cold. You don't understand. I didn't go looking for this. It started small, a favor for someone. Then the money came fast and I kept telling myself it would be temporary. I stood there, arms crossed, listening to him justify the way a man drowns 1 inch at a time. I had debts, he said. You don't know what it was like trying to keep that business alive after the crash. Everyone expected me to succeed, Dad. You. Don't you dare, I cut in. Don't you dare blame this on us. His eyes flashed, then softened again. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying it wasn't a choice anymore. You always had a choice, I said, and you made the same one over and over. He dropped his head into his hands. I'm sorry, I didn't want to hurt anyone. But you did. I thought of Claire, of Mia, of every lie told at my dinner table, every hug that meant less than I believed. I thought of the man in the report dead and the federal agents waiting for the right time to pounce. Jason looked up. His voice was barely a whisper. Can you forgive me? My heart clenched, but I didn't move. I'm not here to forgive you, Jason. He sat back stunned. I'm here to tell you what you're going to do next. He frowned. What do you mean? You're going to tell Claire everything. No more secrets. No more pretending to be someone you're not. You will tell her tonight. She'll leave me, he said flatly. Then that's what happens. He stood suddenly angry. You don't get to decide. I do, I said, voice rising for the first time. I'm your mother and I've been protecting you for too damn long. It ends now. We stood in silence. For once he had no clever retort, just the weight of his choices pressing down on both of us. He finally looked away. What if I go to prison? Then you'll be there honestly, not hiding in this house, lying to your wife and raising a child on stolen time. I picked up the folder, tucked it under my arm, and turned for the door. You're going to tell her tonight, I said, not looking back, and if you don't, I will. Behind me, I heard his voice, low and broken. Mom, please. But I didn't stop. Because forgiveness doesn't come before truth. And the truth was a fire just beginning to spread. The next day, I didn't answer Jason's call. Or the one after that. By the end of the week, I'd silenced his number completely. I didn't block it. I wanted to see the missed calls, the texts piling up. Not because I needed them, but because I needed the reminder this silence wasn't passive, it was a choice. He sent messages that started stiff, we need to talk, then softened, please mom, then guilted, Mia misses you, but I didn't bite. Because I knew what all of it really meant, not remorse but damage control. I stayed away, from the house, from Claire, from any place Jason might try to corner me. I had nothing left to say until he did the one thing I asked, tell Claire the truth. And as far as I knew, he hadn't. That silence between us, once unimaginable, started to feel like oxygen. I spent the next few weeks focusing on the only thing that still made sense, Mia. I picked her up from school more often, took her to the park. We planted fall bulbs in the garden and painted her bedroom at my place a soft lavender just like she wanted. She didn't ask where her father was, sh. He didn't ask why I'd stopped coming to Sunday dinners. She just leaned into me a little harder each time I hugged her. And maybe that was enough for now. But when I was alone, the weight came back. Not just grief, but confusion, shame, the kind of ache that lives in your bones that no amount of sleep or distraction can shake. I'd raised Jason, I'd taught him right from wrong, or I thought I had. Where had he gone? I found a therapist through Barbara's church, Dr. Levinson, mid-60s, practical but kind. The first session, I sat across from her in a worn leather chair and told her everything, from the locked container in Jason's garage to the photo to the confrontation. She listened quietly, no judgment, no hand-wringing. When I finally stopped talking, she said something that landed like truth. You didn't fail him, Evelyn, he chose this path, and now you get to choose yours. I nodded, but it would take time for my heart to catch up. Still, I kept going back, every Thursday, slowly peeling back layers I hadn't touched in years, the guilt, the misplaced loyalty, the way I'd built my life around keeping everyone else afloat. Meanwhile, I stopped looking over my shoulder. I still checked the locks, still double-checked Mia's pickup schedule, but the fear that had once wrapped itself around my throat loosened its grip. I was reclaiming something, not quickly, not completely, but steadily. It had been almost 4 weeks since I'd seen Jason when I found the letter. Tucked between the pages of The Old Man and the Sea, a book he gave me one Mother's Day, long before anything broke. It wasn't long. Mom. I told her I did what you asked. She left me. I've been staying at a motel. I'm not asking for sympathy. I just wanted you to know. I miss you. Jason. There were no threats, no excuses, no pleas. Just lost cold and plain. I closed the book and held it for a long time, unsure what I felt. Not relief, not sorrow exactly, maybe distance, a kind of emotional quiet that felt earned. I didn't respond. Because whatever came next had to be on my terms. That night, as I was tucking Mia in, she looked at me and asked, "Are you okay now, Grandma?" I didn't lie. Not yet, I said softly, but I'm getting there. She smiled and hugged me so hard I thought my heart might crack wide open, but instead of breaking, it held. After she fell asleep, I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window, watching the wind shake the trees. My phone lit up on the counter. This time it was Jason. It was Claire. One line. Can we meet alone? Claire and I met at a quiet cafe on the east side of town. She looked thinner, tired. Her eyes were puffy, her voice subdued. She didn't speak for the first few minutes. Neither did I. When she finally looked up, her mouth trembled as she said, "I wish I'd asked questions sooner." I believed her, but I didn't say so. Some things, even regret, come too late. That night, I sat at my kitchen table long after Mia had gone to bed. I took out every bank statement, property record, investment file with my name on it and laid them across the table like puzzle pieces. Jason had never been on my accounts, but grief makes you thorough. I needed to know there wasn't a single crack he could crawl through. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not someone from a billboard or a radio ad. This one came recommended through Barbara's brother, a retired probate judge. Her name was Janice Rivera. She didn't flinch when I told her the situation, just nodded, took notes, and said, "We're going to get ahead of this." She started with the basics, freezing any accounts Jason might have had indirect access to, adding security flags to my property titles, checking credit lines for unauthorized activity just in case. Then we moved to Mia. "I want to create a trust," I told her, "in her name, and I want Jason completely shut out, no access, no override, nothing." Janice raised an eyebrow. "That can be done, but once it's filed, it's permanent." "That's the idea," I said. It felt like betrayal in some twisted way, a mother legally cutting off her only child, but it was also the clearest I'd felt in months. This wasn't about revenge, it was about protection. About setting boundaries too strong for love to manipulate. When Janice slid the paperwork across the table, I didn't hesitate, I signed. We worked in quiet rhythm for the next hour: wills, beneficiaries, powers of attorney. I didn't know if Jason's mess would ever reach me directly, but I wasn't going to wait for the next anonymous message to find out. As we packed up, Janice looked at me and said, "You know this means closing a door you may never reopen." I nodded slowly. He closed it the moment he chose that life. On the way home, I stopped at a small park Mia and I often visited. It was empty, just the sound of wind through the pine trees and the faint creak of an empty swing. I sat on a bench and tried to feel something. Relief. Peace, even pride. What I felt instead was distance, vast and unfamiliar, not pain, not exactly, just the space between what I thought life would look like and what it had become. Still, there was power in that distance, in the steps I'd taken. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to Jason's choices, I was building something separate, something solid. Later that evening, I found a note in Mia's backpack, just a quick school assignment: draw your hero. She'd drawn me with glasses too big for my face and gray hair puffier than it really was, but the words underneath caught me. "My grandma helps me feel safe, even when I don't know why." I sat down on the edge of her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead while she slept. That sentence echoed louder than any signature on a legal form. This wasn't just about safety from Jason. It was about becoming the kind of woman I hadn't realized I needed to be. I was almost done cleaning up the kitchen when my doorbell rang. Late, almost 9:30. I paused, dried my hands, and walked to the front door. I opened it slowly. Jason stood there. His eyes hollow, his hands empty. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. And in his voice was something I hadn't heard before, not defiance, not guilt. Just finality. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Jason stood on my porch like a shadow, thinner than I remembered, shoulders slumped, the sharp confidence he always carried stripped away. He looked like a man balancing on the last inch of a cliff, terrified of what waited below. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, gripping the doorframe to steady myself. I didn't want another performance. I didn't want apologies rehearsed in panic or pleas sharpened into manipulation, but Mia was asleep upstairs and I refused to let him anywhere near her. "We'll talk," I said, "outside." He nodded, stepping back. The porch light cast hard angles across his face, making him look older, worn. For the first time in months, I saw the boy he used to be flicker through just for a heartbeat before dissolving into the man he had become. He shoved his hands into his pockets. "I told Claire I did what you asked. She's gone, took Mia with her. I've lost everything." No, I said quietly, you lost everything long before that. He looked up sharply, eyes glistening. I know I messed up, but I'm still your son. That word still hung between us like smoke. My throat burned, but my voice stayed steady. You're not the same son I raised. I don't know who you are anymore. He took a step closer. I want to fix this. I need you to help me. Help, it was always the same word, the same expectation, as if motherhood meant rescue, as if love meant erasing consequences. I can't help you, I said, not anymore. He swallowed hard. Just let me see Mia. I need to see her. She's all I have left. No, I said, firm, final. If you care about her at all, if there's any part of you that still knows right from wrong, you'll stay away until you change your life completely, until you turn yourself in and face what you've done. His face twisted, anger, heartbreak, disbelief colliding inside him. You're threatening to take my daughter from me. No, I said, you already did that. He shook his head like he couldn't hear me, pacing the small stretch of concrete. You don't know what you're asking. If I go to the police, they'll kill me. You think these people are going to let me walk away? I met his eyes. Then you should have thought about that before you tied your life to theirs. He stopped moving, chest rising and falling too fast. You can't throw me away like this. I'm your son. And I loved you, I whispered. More than you'll ever understand, but loving you almost destroyed me. I won't let it destroy Mia too. He stared at me like I had struck him, tears spilled over, unguarded. I'm begging you, don't do this. I forced myself not to look away. This isn't punishment, Jason, it's protection. Silence swallowed the porch. The wind rattled, wind chimes gently, mockingly, a softness that didn't belong to the moment. So that's it, he finally asked. You're cutting me off just like that. No, I said, this is not just like that. This is after months of lies, after the truth tore through every corner of our lives, after you stood in front of me with blood on your hands and called it survival. He crumpled then, sinking onto the top step, hands covering his face. I don't know how to fix this. You start by telling the truth to someone who can do something about it, not to me, not to Claire, to the law. He shook his head violently. I'll go to prison. Maybe, I said, maybe that's what accountability looks like. He looked up, eyes blazing with desperation. You'd really let them lock me up, your own son? Yes, I said, because if you stay free in this life, you'll destroy everything you touch. His breath trembled. I thought you'd understand. I do, I said, and that's why I'm done. I opened the door behind me, just enough to signal the conversation was over. Don't come here again, Jason, not until you've turned yourself in. If you do, I will call the police myself. Something hardened in his expression then, not sadness, not remorse. Something darker. You'll regret this, he whispered. The words landed like ice against my spine. I stepped inside and closed the door. I locked it, and I backed away slowly, pulse hammering like a warning bell. Outside, his footsteps scraped against the porch. Then silence. But as I stood there, hands still on the lock, another sound cut through the quiet, my phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. A new message. Unknown number. You should have listened. My knees nearly buckled. This wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room long after Jason's footsteps faded into the dark. The porch light flickered once, then went still. I kept expecting the doorbell to ring again or another message to come through, but there was only silence, heavy and absolute. The message on my phone, you should have. Listened, remained unread on the screen. I didn't delete it. I didn't respond. I just let it sit there like a loose thread dangling between fear and finality. I watched the sunrise from the kitchen table. That morning, when Mia came downstairs rubbing sleep from her eyes, I managed a smile. She asked if we could make blueberry pancakes, and I said yes. We stood side by side at the stove, and she cracked the eggs like I'd shown her. It was the first time in weeks that the rhythm of life felt still. I didn't talk about Jason, not with her, not with Barbara, not even with Dr. Levinson, not at first. The wound was too deep, and naming it made it feel fresh again. But silence, I've learned, is just another way of bleeding. A week later, I sat in the back of a church basement across from a circle of strangers. Folding chairs, lukewarm coffee, an old piano with 2 broken keys. A sign near the door read, "Families rebuilding after betrayal." I didn't speak the first 2 meetings. Just listened. Mothers, fathers, a sister whose brother defrauded their entire retirement fund, a man whose daughter stole from him to fund her boyfriend's gambling. The stories weren't mine, but they were close enough to remind me I wasn't alone. On the 3rd visit, I finally spoke. "My son lied to me," I said, "for years, and I believed him because I needed to, because the truth would have broken something I thought was sacred." There were nods, no pity, just shared recognition. "But I chose to let go," I said, "and I don't know what that makes me, strong or cruel." A woman across from me leaned forward, her voice soft. "It makes you human." It didn't make the pain vanish, but it made the shame loosen its grip. I started walking every morning, early before the world had time to bruise me. I listened to audiobooks, watched the leaves begin their slow turn toward fall, and let the cool air scrape something clean in me. The calls from Jason stopped. The texts dried up. Even the messages from unknown numbers went quiet. The silence that followed was different from the one that came before. It didn't scare me, it steadied me. Mia and I started planning small things: a trip to Savannah for winter break, a new garden bed for spring vegetables, a weekend project to paint the old rocking chair on the porch. One night while brushing her hair, she looked up in the mirror and asked, "Do you think Daddy will ever come back?" I paused, then said, "I don't know." She nodded like she understood more than I'd said, then she placed her hand over mine. "It's okay if he doesn't, we're okay." I didn't cry, I wanted to, but I didn't. Because she was right. We were okay. Not whole, not untouched. But safe and strong and moving forward. That night I wrote in my journal for the first time in months, just one sentence. "I did what I had to do, and I can live with that." When I closed the journal, a small envelope slipped free from between the pages. I didn't recognize the handwriting on the front, but it was addressed to me, no return address. Inside was a photo. Jason standing on what looked like a pier at night, alone, looking out toward the water. On the back, 4 words scrawled in haste. "It's not over yet." We met in a small bakery just off Howell Mill Road, neutral territory. No memories pressed into the corners, no shadows clinging to the chairs, just the scent of warm cinnamon and rain through cracked windows. Claire was already seated when I arrived. She looked older than she had a month ago, eyes rimmed red, jaw drawn tight. There was a cup of tea in front of her, untouched, her hands curled around it like it might anchor her to the moment. When I sat down, she looked up, eyes glistening. "Thank you for coming." I gave a small nod, no need for pleasantries, we both knew why we were here. She didn't stall. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not seeing it, for not asking more questions, for letting it get this far." Her voice cracked near the end, and she pressed her lips together to hold the rest back. "I loved him," she continued, quieter now, "and I thought love meant trusting him, believing him. I didn't think he could lie like that, not for so long." I listened, not to judge, not to forgive, but because she needed to say it and I needed to hear it without jumping to rescue or reassure. "I didn't want to believe it either," I said, "but eventually wanting to believe something doesn't make it true." Claire wiped under her eyes and nodded. "When I found the account records, when I read the files you gave me, it felt like everything I built my life around just collapsed." "Because it did," I said, "and you're still standing." That caught her off guard for a moment, the strength she didn't know she had showed through. She sat up straighter. "I keep thinking back," she said, "to the day I married him, to the night we brought Mia home from the hospital. He wasn't always like this." "No," I said, "but he became this, and that matters more than." "What came before?" She looked down at her hands. "Do you think people like him ever come back from this?" I took a breath, thought carefully, not without losing everything first, not unless they want to change more than they want to be right. Claire's jaw tensed. "He doesn't, not really. He says he's sorry, but he still blames everyone else, says the system pushed him into it, that it's not his fault." "It is," I said gently, "it always was." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question I think she came here to ask all along: can you forgive me? I met her eyes. I'm not angry at you, Claire. You were in it just like I was. We both looked away. But you knew sooner. And I paid the price for waiting. She winced. So that's it. This is goodbye. I let the silence sit between us before answering. Not for Mia, I'll always be part of her life, and you'll always be part of that, but for everything else, for the dinners, the holidays, the pretending, we're done. She nodded slowly, like someone forcing herself to understand what she didn't want to accept. I get it. I'm not angry, I added, but I won't carry guilt for what I didn't cause. Claire exhaled shakily. I'm glad she has you. She deserves peace. We stood, no hugs, no lingering, just a quiet acknowledgement of something ending. As I stepped out into the drizzle, I felt something loosen inside me, not completely, not without ache, but enough to breathe deeper than I had in months. Back home, Mia was reading in the corner of the living room, legs tucked under her, her favorite blanket around her shoulders. When I walked in, she looked up and smiled. Did you say goodbye? She asked. I did, I said, setting down my keys, and it's the last one I needed to say. She nodded like she understood more than I'd said and turned back to her book. But I saw her reach out quietly and place her hand on the edge of the couch, leaving space for me. And as I sat beside her, letting the silence settle in like soft rain, I felt my phone buzz against my leg. Blocked number. Again. I didn't pick it up. But Mia looked at me and said, without turning her head, he's still watching, isn't he? It started slowly. The ache didn't vanish overnight, but it changed shape, less sharp, more distant, like a song I could still hum but no longer needed to sing. I stopped bracing every time the phone buzzed. I stopped expecting him on the porch. The blocked number never called again. Eventually, I stopped wondering why. I repainted the kitchen, nothing dramatic, just a warm shade of green that made the morning light look softer. I cleared the shelves of things that didn't feel like mine anymore: Jason's old trophies, the dusty wedding photo Claire had left behind, the wooden picture frame that had cracked when Mia knocked it over last year. I put up new photos instead. Mia at the science fair, Barbara and me holding wine glasses and squinting into the sun. A blurry snapshot from a road trip I took in college, one I hadn't looked at in decades. I'd forgotten who that girl was. So I went looking for her. One crisp Friday in October, I packed an overnight bag and drove east, no plan, no destination. Just the open road and the soft hum of a playlist I hadn't heard since 1992. I stopped in Asheville, where a college friend still ran a bed and breakfast. She hadn't seen me in 15 years but hugged me like we'd never skipped a day. We drank cider on the porch, talked about old professors and lost crushes, laughed too loud, slept late, ate pancakes that tasted like freedom. And when I came home, Mia was waiting at the door, arms open, stories tumbling from her like water. She had joined the drama club. She wanted to learn French. She wanted to grow sunflowers next spring. She was dreaming again because she felt safe enough to. I watched her move through the house like it belonged to her future. That was the life I wanted to build now, not one guarded by fear but shaped by light. I started attending art classes twice a week. Acrylics, I wasn't good, not really, but the brush in my hand made me feel connected to something unspoken. I painted trees, birds, a crooked lighthouse that everyone said looked like it was leaning into a storm. I kept it. One afternoon, I came home to find Mia sitting on the floor with her school books spread around her. She looked up and grinned. I wrote about you, she said, for my English class. Oh, I asked, carefully setting down my grocery bags. The prompt was, who do you admire most and why? I raised an eyebrow and I beat out Taylor Swift. She rolled her eyes, barely. We laughed. Then she said very seriously, I told them you taught me what it means to be brave, even when it hurts. I didn't respond. I just walked into the kitchen, heart full to the point of aching, and took a long breath. There were still moments, quiet ones, where memory tried to pull me back. A photo I'd missed tucked in an old book, a news alert thaw. Tea made my stomach clench, a shadow that passed too close to the front window at night. But they didn't define me anymore. I chose the silence now, I chose the distance. I chose the path where my life wasn't shaped by his absence but by my own presence. One morning, while Mia was at school, I sat in the garden beside the lavender she helped plant, journal in hand. The last page was almost full. I'd written my way through the storm. And on the final line I wrote, "He broke me, but I rebuilt." I closed the journal, placed it in the drawer beside my bed, and stood. Just as I turned to go inside, I noticed something odd, a small envelope at the foot of the porch steps. No stamp, no name, just placed. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just stared at it, the wind tugging at the edge of my coat, the sun not quite warm enough. I had rebuilt, I had chosen life, but something still lingered. And it had found its way to my door. Again. I opened the envelope the next morning. The paper inside was creased and smudged with something I told myself was dirt. No signature, just a single sentence scrawled in Jason's handwriting, shaky, rushed, unmistakable. "You won't hear from me again, I promise." I stared at it until my coffee went cold. Then I folded it in half once, then again, and placed it in the same drawer as my journal. I didn't tell Mia. And I didn't believe it. But I chose to move forward anyway. Spring came early that year. The lavender in the garden bloomed in soft purple waves, and I let myself dream of futures that didn't involve waiting for the other shoe to drop. I scheduled an appointment with Janice Rivera again. This time there were no emergencies, just clarity. "I want to update everything," I said as we sat in her office. She flipped open my file. "What kind of changes?" "I want Mia's guardianship plan revised if anything happens to me. I want language in the trust that makes it irrevocable. And I want a clause that ensures Jason has no legal standing, no challenge, no loophole, no argument." Janice raised her brows, impressed. "You've done your homework." "I've lived my homework." She nodded and we got to work. When the final signatures were done, I leaned back in the chair and let the silence settle around us. "I never thought I'd have to protect my granddaughter from her own father," I said. Janice didn't speak, but her eyes held a kind of respect I hadn't seen before. "Now I know I can." In April, I received an invitation from the community center 2 towns over. They were opening a new wing for counseling and recovery services. A friend of Barbara's had mentioned my story, what I'd done, what I'd walked through. "Would you consider being a founding sponsor?" the woman on the phone asked. "You'd have full discretion over the name." I almost said no. But after I hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the calendar on the fridge. A note Mia had written in crooked letters months earlier still clung to the edge. "You are brave, Grandma." So I called back and said yes. I named it the Second Path Foundation. Underneath, in smaller print, "In memory of those we lost, even when they're still living." It wasn't for Jason, it was for every person like me who needed to build a new life out of betrayal, for parents, for survivors, for the ones who stayed too long and the ones who walked away just in time. Mia graduated on a sunlit June afternoon. She wore a yellow dress under her gown and waved at me from the front row. When they called her name, I stood without meaning to, clapping until my palms stung. She walked across the stage with her chin high and her smile steady, not a little girl anymore, not afraid of shadows. Afterward, she ran into my arms and said, "I did it." And I whispered back, "So did I." That night, we sat on the back porch, sharing a slice of lemon cake and watching fireflies blink through the trees. She rested her head on my shoulder and asked, "Do you ever miss him?" I didn't answer right away. "Yes," I said finally, "but not who he was at the end. I miss the part of him that never got to grow up." She nodded slowly. "I think that part's gone now." I reached for her hand, and some things we don't go back for, we build forward instead. 3 days later, a package arrived with no return address. Inside, a USB drive. I plugged it in. Dozens of files, video clips, audio recordings, a confession, Jason's voice flat but full of detail, dates, names, places, evidence. Everything the FBI would ever need. The last file was labeled simply, "For Mia, someday." I stared at the screen, unsure if I was shaking from fear or relief. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like breath. The final legacy, I thought, wasn't mine to define anymore. But maybe, just maybe, Jason had chosen something different at the end. I reached for the phone and called David. It didn't happen all at once. Peace came the way dawn does, quiet, gradual, impossible to name until the whole sky has changed color. Ari. It came in the sound of Mia's laughter drifting from the backyard, in the way she stomped through the garden in muddy shoes, singing some pop song off-key, in the softness of her eyes when she looked at me and didn't see the worry anymore, just home. I didn't tell her about the USB, not yet, maybe not ever. That story belonged to a future version of her, one old enough to decide what to do with it. For now, I kept it locked away, labeled and dated, beside the trust documents and the folder from Janice. I didn't hear from the FBI. David confirmed the drive was in the right hands. They were moving forward with discretion. That's all he said, and I didn't ask for more. Because peace, I've learned, often comes when you stop chasing answers. Mia thrived. She got accepted into a pre-college art program, started volunteering at the library, painted the garden fence teal and left her handprint on the last post. When I asked her why, she shrugged. So you know I was here, she said, even after I go. I smiled and blinked hard against the tears. I spent more mornings on the porch than anywhere else. Tea in one hand, a book in the other, blanket draped over my knees. The chaos had left its mark, yes, but I wasn't living in the mark anymore. I was living past it. Claire sent postcards every now and then, polite, short. She and Mia spoke regularly. We agreed on boundaries. I held those lines with quiet strength. The past didn't get to rewrite itself just because time had passed. Barbara came by with flowers on Sundays. We didn't talk about Jason anymore. We didn't need to. Sometimes, when I passed the front door in the evenings, I'd still glance toward the driveway, not in fear, just in memory, the ghost of a man I once loved as fiercely as I feared losing. He never came back. And I never expected him to. The weight I'd carried for so long, grief, shame, anger, didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It softened at the edges. I stopped measuring my choices by what-ifs. I stopped apologizing to myself for doing what needed to be done. Because I'd saved her. Not just me. I was no longer a woman reacting to disaster. I was a woman living again. One night, close to Mia's birthday, we had dinner on the back deck, just the two of us, candles flickering between us, lavender brushing our ankles in the breeze. She looked up over her fork and said, "You seem lighter lately." I laughed. I switched to decaf. She rolled her eyes but smiled. "No, I mean it. It's like you stopped waiting for something bad to happen." I thought about that, then nodded, because I did. And it was true. Somewhere between painting fences and updating wills and watching her grow, I'd stopped looking over my shoulder. Not because the danger was gone, but because I knew now I could survive it, all of it. Later that evening, I sat in bed with my journal, a fresh one this time, first page blank, no fear in my pen. I wrote, "Peace isn't the absence of pain, it's the decision to live without permission from it." As I closed the book, the wind outside picked up, the trees swayed, the world always in motion. And then the softest sound. A knock. At the door. Not loud, not threatening, just present. I froze. Not out of fear, but because even peace has its echoes. I stood slowly, walked to the front door, and paused with my hand on the knob. No voice followed, no footsteps. Just a quiet envelope on the welcome mat. No name. No address. No return to sender. Just a single line on the front. "For Mia when she's ready." I picked it up and held it to my chest. Then turned off the porch light. And let the night hold what it would. Some mornings I still wake before the sun, though there's no urgency pressing at my chest anymore. No imaginary knock, no half-formed fear. Just stillness and choice. I sit with my tea, now always decaf, and watch the first light move through the garden like a gentle tide. The lavender is taller this year, stronger. I like to think it remembers the hands that planted it. The small, unsteady ones, the ones shaped like hope. Mia leaves for campus soon. She's only an hour away, but the house already feels quieter. I find her notes on the fridge: don't forget to water the sunflowers, buy more oat milk, and I tuck them in my recipe box like postcards from a new world she's building. She's ready. And so am I. There are no more locks on my phone, no folders buried in desk drawers. The USB is sealed in a safety deposit box labeled with a simple note: if she ever wants to know. I hope she never does, but I'll be ready if she does. That's what love looks like now, readiness, not rescue. I think about Jason sometimes, not the man he became, but the boy he once was. The boy who built Lego castles on the living room floor, the one who asked if the moon followed us home. That boy is long gone, and I've stopped searching for his reflection in shadows. Some grief is like a garden: you prune it, care for it, and let it grow in the shape of something soft. I updated my journal last week, just a few lines, a record of the quiet life I've claimed. Dinner on the porch with Mia. She's laughing more now. I am too. That's all it said, and it was enough. The counselor at the foundation says we should start offering family workshops. I said yes, not because I think I have all the answers, but because I know what it's like to be the one left holding the pieces, to be the one who chooses peace after pain. I sat through one of the sessions last month just to listen. A man, mid-40s, steelworker, eyes hollowed by betrayal, asked the room, "How do you live with the guilt of letting someone go?" I wanted to say, you don't carry it forever, you set it down, you walk forward anyway. But I didn't have to say it, someone else did, a mother, maybe not unlike me. And I realized then, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was part of someone else's healing. Today, Mia and I walked along the river path, the one near the bridge where she used to feed the ducks. She took photos for her art project. I just watched her, carefree, certain, wearing the self I'd fought to protect. At one point she stopped, pointed to a stone bench beneath the willow tree and said, "That's your spot." I laughed. "What makes it mine?" "You always sit there," she said, "when you're thinking or letting go." She was right. We sat for a while, not saying much. When we got home, she went to her room to pack. I started prepping dinner, lavender chicken, her favorite. There was no tension, no unspoken storm hovering. Just life. Full and unremarkable. Beautiful in the way quiet lives often are. Later that night, as I turned down the beds and checked the locks, still always, I passed the mirror in the hallway and paused. I looked tired, older. But not broken. And for the first time in years, I didn't flinch at my own reflection. I smiled at her, the woman who stayed, who fought, who finally chose to live. She didn't need permission anymore. She just needed truth. And she had it now. I went to the window, opened it wide, and let the night air in. The crickets chirped. The wind carried no warnings, just the scent of lavender and earth and everything we'd rebuilt. I sat on the edge of my bed and picked up my journal, turned to the final page. I wrote, "They warned me about my son. I didn't believe them until I saw what he was hiding. But now I'm free." And I meant every word.